Okay, hello Year 12 and welcome to week 9. So you are missing double English today, so I thought I would make you a screencast. I'll try and keep it short because I know you are busy. This week we are talking about the following 3 ideas: propaganda, totalitarianism and control, and courage and resistance. And we'll focus mostly today on courage and resistance. So, what was your homework from last week? I did ask that everyone have a go at watching the Ed Rollo video on comparative phrases. All right, there's lots of Ed Rollo videos slowly being uploaded, okay? Watch it, make notes, highlight phrases, etc. As Miss Brooks has said, you know the drill. Submit your week 8 paragraph by Sunday night. That was last night, and I only have 7 from my class. Slack, Year 12. Read both texts up to page 150, annotate, etc. Read and annotate this week's one, all right? Ready to go for class tomorrow, please, if you can. Monday, no classes. Tuesday, read and discuss annotations. Begin to identify points of similarity. Finish writing first piece. Read and annotate extract 2 and 3. That's a bit ambitious, Miss Brooks. My class will just try and work on doing one really solid one. If we could have something written by this Thursday so that we can do some peer review, that would be amazing. All right. And then remember to please share with me your Google Doc that has your weekly paragraphs on it, preferably all on the same doc. You've got 5 key words for this for this week. Your first one is complicitly. Your second one is intimacy. Your third one is conviction. And then you've got a couple of base words that I'd like to see you using in your writing for this week: interrogated and informer. All right, interrogated and informer. And I have put further on their definitions. All right, you've got your learning intention and your success criteria. A lot of us are struggling with our comparative vocabulary. So I've shared this with you, all right, the actual doc, but I just thought I'd put it in this week's slide so that you can have a look at it. There's words for similar, there's words for differences, comparison, contrast, and even some words for summarizing or emphasizing, all right? Maybe print that out and have it in front of you when you are writing, okay, to help you improve your vocabulary. Of course, make sure you read the samples that are being produced each week by your teaching staff, because they are also a good place where you can learn more words and phrases. Again, by Thursday, it would be good if you had something written for peer review. I only had 4 people that were ready to do peer review last week. Slack. It is better that you are reading each other's work, because I cannot always read all of your work. Neither can Miss Brooks or Miss Hando. By Sunday, your finalized piece should be finished and submitted. All right, so we're in week 9, of course, this week. Page 118 to 166, and then page 97 to 112. All right. First, before we get into our specific passages, I wanted to talk to you about a few key ideas that I felt we weren't really very confident on yet. So, I wanted to talk about propaganda, and more specifically, I wanted to talk about the role of propaganda in terms of how it controls the people in Oceania and in the GDR, and how it influences their views. So, I've tried to put up 3 points here for each. I've actually ended up with 4 for 1984, but I've run out of space to do 4 for Stasiland. So, and I've tried to compare them to each other so you can kind of go idea 1, idea 2, and you might like to put these annotations into your books as well. This is the idea of a lot of this weekly work, all right? In 1984, one of the big elements of propaganda is language, all right, and the control of language, limiting behavior and thoughts. And the example I could think of for that was the Newspeak dictionary that Syme works on, which seeks to admit all words that contradict the party so that people can't actually have other thoughts. My first example from Stasiland of propaganda would be the Black Channel, all right, which becomes a a form of controlling the Germans and limiting the influence of the West, and that's Edward von Schnitzler, all right, or Edward von Schnee, so you might want to have a bit of a read back over that. We've got, of course, Doublethink in 1984, which is most clearly seen through the party's slogans: freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength, and war is peace. Propaganda is also seen through the experiences of Julia in Stasiland, for example, when she visits the unemployment office after she's had her, I guess, interrogation, and she's told there is no unemployment in the German DDR. The regime makes it clear unemployment doesn't exist, so she can't get a job because of the role of the Stasi. But when she tries to state this, she's sort of told, well, unemployment isn't a thing. Again, this is propaganda. Of course, people are unemployed. The rewriting of history and continual falsification of facts. Again, the clear example that Orwell uses of propaganda is Winston's work in the record department. I've also said the use of Big Brother as a political figurehead, and I've compared this role of Big Brother to The Wall, and how Funda says The Wall is like a character within the novel. And I really liked the quote that the wall is a cut a strange wound through the city, from page 20. Please remember to put each of these examples into your annotations in your book. So that's 7 just here that you can please add if you haven't already got them. Then we need to talk about courage and resistance, which is important for this week. Now, I was thinking about courage, and I was thinking about heroes and everything, and I was thinking how it's really interesting how we compare who is and isn't a hero in these books. And I'm not sure about you, but I don't really see Winston or Julia in 1984 as a hero, and I think that's deliberate. I don't think Orwell wants us to see Winston or Julia as a hero. I mean, especially the fact that Winston doesn't look or act like a hero. He's not strong and he often fails. You know, and Julia's very selfish. Winston's past, I think, where the issues he's had with his mother make him less heroic, and then when he meets O'Brien and says that he would harm others because of his own political ideals or beliefs, all right, is also important. In Stasiland, I think that our characters are much more heroic, and that's for a variety of reasons. I think partially because often, well, at least for Miriam and Julia, they don't mean so much to oppose the party in the same way that Winston and Julia do in 1984. So I said Miriam's the first character that reminds me of courage or resistance. I think the courage she has as a teenager, all right, when she tries to escape. Also, the courage she has, which I guess comes from her experience as a teenager with Charlie's death, and the fact that she continually pursues his death and she wants to know what's going on and what's happening. Then Julia, who's really important in this week's extracts, she shows courage, of course. She's dragged in for questioning over the Italian boyfriend, but she would not inform on him or at all. That's page 112, and that's really interesting. You might want to compare in your writing this week the role of the two Julias, because they're both focused upon. And then Frau Paul is really interesting, but she's different from Julia and Miriam because I think her opposition is more overt. Remember that Anna later goes on to interview her, I think it's like her boyfriend of the time or something, about what they were up to and the person who she was asked to inform on. And it's sort of like this whole idea that actually she was quite an active opposer. But nevertheless, I think what she does is quite courageous, because she's asked to inform, and in the end she has to decide against her son, which again is very courageous, and you might want to think about whether that's the right decision or the wrong decision. We're going to talk about totalitarianism in class tomorrow. I'd like us to come up with some examples of totalitarianism in general together, because I think it's interesting to find out what you guys think rather than just what I think in this case, all right? Let's talk about the Julias. 1984's Julia and Stasiland's Julia. They're quite different. So I've said that in 1984, Julia is aware that the system is oppressive and she actively rebels against it. Whereas Julia Berens, which is Julia from Stasiland, she's loyal and she believes in the government. So that's really different from the get-go. Just as Julia from 1984 engages in explicitly forbidden activities like sex with party members, inner and outer party members, Julia in Stasiland does not. Her rebellion is not active. She merely has an Italian boyfriend, and it's a government that's almost seeking dissidents. So as a result, Julia from 1984 can't be disappointed. She never believed in the system, whereas Julia from Stasiland is disappointed. She's almost cheated out of a future. Everything that happens after the Stasi become involved in her life, and the Julia we meet when she becomes friends with Anna is certainly someone who feels that her life and her future has in many ways been diminished. Remember, of course, that Julia is Funda's landlady or landlord who continually comes over. You've got your topic sentence for this week. So what are the key words? What ideas will need to be unpacked? How are you going to compare and contrast? And I've tried to come up with a few key ideas that you might want to go through this week, because I felt last week maybe people were a little bit unsure of what they were supposed to talk about. So I've tried to scaffold it a lot this week, especially because of our lack of class time. All right, so I've said that there's a few things that we need to be aware of in this topic sentence. So the prompt that Miss Brooks wrote for us this week was 1984 in Stasiland ultimately show us that standing up to authority is futile. Discuss. So there's a couple of key words in our topic sentence that we might want to unpack specifically in relation to this prompt. So the first one I've drawn your attention to is the word complicitly. All right, the idea that everybody was, or sorry, not everybody, the vast majority of people were complicit. These governments relied on those in this state not to rebel. They were powerless if they did. And I think this is really interesting in relation to Winston and what he thinks about the proles in 1984. All right. The second thing that we might want to talk about is room 118. You might want to think about room 118 and the role of torture in comparison to 1984. All right. Is torture relevant in this case? How much torture, etc.? Interesting that there's both rooms. Remembering that Stasiland is real, whereas 1984 is fiction. When Julia Berens is interrogated by the Stasi, she refuses to betray anyone. So that's an interesting comparison between the two Julias. I thought the coarseness of language was really interesting in this week's paragraphs, because I felt like Orwell was really judging Julia. The language is judgmental. Winston is judging her. Intimacy, so of course sexual rebellion, the role of the sash. Think about what Winston sees in Julia. Think about the conversations that are had with regards to the sash and everything that happens around that. Winston and Julia's rebellion is doomed. So compare the ends of both texts. One is hopeful, one is not. And I've asked, what role does retrospection play? So maybe think about the fact that Stasiland is written retrospectively. And think about whether you can argue in any way whether there is hope in 1984. All right, so if you're going to agree or disagree, how are you going to do it? Well, here's my line of thinking, and this is honestly just my opinion. So when I was like, standing up to authority is futile, do I agree, do I disagree? So I guess I had two lines of thought. I was like, at first I was like, yeah, absolutely, it is futile, because I was thinking about 1984 in the end, because pain wins out in the end. You know, the rats win and they betray each other. And even in Stasiland, when Julia refuses to inform, her life is basically ruined. She can no longer have a free life and things change. If you were to disagree, and in some ways I do disagree, I would say due to the retrospective nature of Stasiland, there's hope at the end, and we feel like Julia and the others who stood up to the GDR were really doing the right things. So I guess you could say both, all right? You could say all one or all the other, or you could say both, okay? That's totally up to you, and that's an important thing to think about too when it comes to essay questions. I'm not going to read through this with you, but what I've got is I've just highlighted the words that I think are relevant or specific, and I've tried to make notes down the side. So you'll see, like, you know, I'm good at spotting people who don't belong. I've just put it over on the right hand side and written down my analysis or interpretation. You guys do not have to agree with this. You might think it's different, like you might pull something else out of open jeering hatred other than negative connotations, okay? That's totally up to you. I would really encourage you, though, at the very least, to please, on your copy of the weekly readings, do these annotations and then add your own to them and use these as a bit of a guide so that no one's got an excuse for not writing anything down, because at the very least you've got what I've put on these slides. All right, and then we've got the annotations for Stasiland. All right, so we've got things like the juxtaposition of the middle folder and bureaucracy with the love letters, the choice of language that Funda uses with absurd, and there's a bit of a typo there. Oh, sorry, no, there's not. Her they wanted. All right, so that Julia comes to the interest of the party. That Julia doesn't inform, like we've talked about, the comparison of the two Julias. I would not be able to determine my own life. Maybe compare this in 1984. Can anyone control their own life? Can anyone control their life in Stasiland? And the implicit threat of Room 118. Alright, so this is your prompt again. 1984 and Stasiland ultimately show us that standing up to authority is futile. Discuss. Additional references. Again, I've already spoken about this, but I just quickly noted the use of retrospection means at the end of the text there's hope, and I've referenced this in my sample for the week. And I've said in 1984 at the end of the book there's no hope as they betray each other, and the quote is, "In the face of pain there are no heroes." I would add that to maybe your passage for this week, something else to think about. Remember, we can branch out beyond the passages are our basis, but we can use other things. Just try and make sure that the vast majority is based on those passages. Okay, so in terms of a plan, here's what you need to know. I've tried to go with a bit of a color coordination to make things easier for you. So if I've got notes in purple, it means 1984. Blue means comparison or comparative language. Yellow means a quote, and pink means Stasiland. So this is what you need to write about this week if you don't have an idea on your own of what you could write about, okay? So I would encourage you to come up with something different, all right? I would encourage you to maybe have a look at what I've got and then maybe add your own ideas. But if you are sitting at home today and you are thinking, oh my God, I have no idea how to do this passage analysis, I've missed class, or I don't really know what on earth is going on, this is what you need to look at, all right? So I've suggested that you'd have your topic sentence, okay? That's provided to you each week. So you must lead with that topic sentence, please. That's not a negotiable. I don't want you writing your own topic sentences at the moment. That just gets a little bit too confusing, okay? And please make sure that you do go back and read the samples, all right? Because I still have people that are not writing in the correct manner or the correct form, okay? So I've said, first of all, talk about courage with Winston and Julia. Are they courageous, etc.? Then I've said, what is Winston's rebellion against the party driven by? Is it driven by his own inability to accept the party's propaganda? Is it political? Is it personal? I've said that there's a bit of dissatisfaction with World of Oceania, and then I've given you a comparative sentence here. I've said, you know, whatever you've said at the start, you could say blah blah blah, reminiscent of George Orwell's fictional Big Brother. Funda explores the pervasive nature, so like the pervasive means something that's like in your face and it's there all the time, of state control and the effect of ubiquitous surveillance on the lives of ordinary citizens. All right, so you'd be like, 1984 comparison. Oh, look, we've got to pink, so we're talking about Stasiland. Funda suggests rebellion is an individual pursuit. Are examples of rebellion or courage in Stasiland Julia, Miriam, and Frau Paul. You could talk about all of them, or as I would suggest, maybe just focus on Julia because she is mentioned in your passages for this week. Maybe say that with Julia there's no overt rebellion, but she still comes to the attention of the GDR. She actually believed at the start in her government. Funda's Julia refuses to inform, unlike Winston. back to 1984, subtle rebellion is seen through the use of language in 1984, and then Funda's ending is more hopeful than that of 1984. A bit of a comparison there. So, if I quickly just show you what I've done up, I've got a bit of a plan here. It's probably a bit too long, okay? And you can see that mine is not perfect. You can see here that Miss Hando's pulled me up on my choice of the word justice here, okay? When I've said that what Winston seeks is justice, and I've said, well, I'm not really sure how to reword it, and Ms. Hando's going to get back to me on that. So this is why I'm talking to you about peer review, okay? Myself, Miss Hando, Miss Brooks, when we write things, we don't get them right the first time, all right? We need each other to help, I guess, to assist us. So I would really encourage you, if you can find some time this week, even if you just write a couple of hundred words, that by Thursday, it would be amazing if you could have something written for me, okay? Because what that would mean is that then on Thursday you would be able to swap your work with a friend, okay? And they could have a read of it. And it's especially good if you're swapping with someone who's of a similar ability, or even someone who's a bit stronger than you when it comes to English, because they'll pick up on really interesting things. And the thing about peer review is they'll pick up on things that I or Miss Brooks or Miss Hando might not necessarily pick up on either. I hope that was helpful. I'll chat to you all in class tomorrow. Please make sure that at the very least you've done your reading and that you're working on your annotations. Remember that your passages from last week, week 8, are now overdue. Thanks.